just a couple ground rules. This isn't structured to be a debate per se. Feel free, we actually encourage you guys to respond to one another's comments if you so feel the need, but we ask that you try to limit interruptions of each other's answers as much as possible. If we interrupt you guys during a long answer, we don't mean to be rude. Even if it comes off as rude, we kind of just got to keep things going. So that's probably inevitably going to happen at some point. Okay, and then once we're ready, okay, cool. Well, welcome. This is Willamette Week's endorsement interview for House District 48. We're going to start by asking each of you just take 1 or 2 minutes, introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, what you do for work, and why you're running for this position. And we'll start with you, John.
All right, my name is John Masterman, candidate for House District 48. I am a husband, a dad of 2 amazing little girls. I work for myself, small business owner. I rebuild transmissions for a living.
Like car trans?
Yes, mostly trucks, but cars and light trucks.
Okay.
So your specialty is just rebuilding transmissions?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you have any employees, or is it?
It's just me.
Okay.
Occasional small bits of assistance, but it's the whole show is me primarily.
Got it. Okay.
Where was I? You had me sidetracked about talking about cars. I've always been a car enthusiast ever since I was a teenager. I've always been a fan of just let me go and do my thing if I'm not disturbing anybody. And a lot of the things that have gone on recently have really started to bite into being able to just quietly and go do my thing. Different regulations, restrictions, extra taxes that mess with me being able to earn a living, still have to pay all those fun bills each month, housing, daycare, gas, groceries, all the fun stuff that most people are stuck with. And it's getting harder and harder to make that happen. And it just got to the point where, well, instead of complaining about it, here I am.
Okay. Can you be a little bit more specific, and we'll come back to more specifics later, but different regulations and restrictions, can you talk about that? What do you mean by that?
A lot of the regulations have affected, how they affect me directly are regulations for various businesses that end up running their costs up, which means that all of my parts and supplies cost more.
So supply chain.
For the most part, yes. There are other areas, but that would be a primary one, yes.
Okay, and are those more state level or federal level? I mean,
nationwide.
Okay.
Nationwide, it's happening everywhere.
Okay. Okay, well.
Yes, can you phrase the question for me again so I can...
Oh yeah, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us why you're running for the seat, what you do for work, and
my name is Hoa Nguyen. It means gentle kindness in Vietnamese. My grandpa named me, and that's a big part of who I am because my family instilled in me connections to culture, to names, and knowing that I'm in America, they really want to make sure that I stay rooted in my Vietnamese culture. So I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. As the daughter of refugee, I was the first in my family to be born here in the United States. So my family escaped the Vietnam War in 1975 and resettled in New Orleans, along with thousands of other Vietnamese refugees at that time. And so with that, I am known as the quote-unquote Chị Hai in the family, which means oldest daughter or sister. So I took on a lot of responsibility as a kid. My parents owned a convenience store, and I spent all of my childhood working and helping my parents out at the store and taking the responsibility of caretaking for my younger siblings. I have 3 younger siblings, and an opportunity came for me to move to Portland, and I was able to attend St. Mary's Academy High School in downtown Portland, and I've been in Portland for almost a little over 20 years now. So I also graduated from Portland State University with a BA in sociology, and then I started my career in public education right out of college. And so I've done a lot of work around community organizing, youth advocacy, and parent engagement around education. So I've worked in nonprofits and public schools. In the past decade, I was working for Portland Public Schools as a school attendance coach, which focuses on chronic absenteeism. And most people don't know this, it's an epidemic in our state. Oregon is number 3 in the nation, we're one of the highest absent rates. And that's contributed to structures around-
At the high school level, all levels?
All state level, just in general as a whole, when we look at the data.
Number 3?
Wow. And Alaska, and I believe Washington is ahead of, it's like above us, yeah. So I track this data, that's part of my job. I track this data, and our goal is to really develop a system of response to this. And so over the decade, when I learned about the work, is contribute to infrastructures around homelessness, poverty, mental health is a big piece, school climate. and everything, right? It's a community issue, and so that's what caused me, that's the reason why I'm stepping up to run, is because I was been on this hamster wheel, right, for the longest time, and realized in order for us to improve our public education in our community, we need to improve the infrastructures that impacts it. So I look at things in a holistic approach, systemic approach, and being data-driven is a big part of my work. And so I currently now work for Clackamas Education Service District as a student and community engagement specialist. So it's the same work. The past decade, I've worked directly with students and families doing direct services and schools and doing leadership development and training. But I'm expanding my work now to Clackamas County and working more on a more county-wide level, right? And so expanding the work even further more. And Clackamas County will be interested to learn what absenteeism will look like in more rural areas. So that's going to be something to really identify and really work on.
Are you currently so are you a county employee?
No,
Okay.
ESD.
Okay.
Clackamas
okay.
ESD.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you were out doing home visits, you were saying?
Yes.
With parents whose children were suffering?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Prevalent absenteeism, yes. I can talk about it all day long, but that's really the big foundation of my educational work, and the reason why I am running, because we need to build policies. I looked at the state policy, and absenteeism has been a big initiative in education for the longest time, but the last update we had on the state initiative was in 2016. So a lot has happened. So COVID really exacerbated even those challenges even further. And so there's a lot of lessons and things that we have learned over the couple of years, and I hope to move forward in a better direction to serve our students and mainly our children at the end of the day.
John, can you elaborate on one or two bills you'd like to introduce to the legislature if elected? Kind of what would be your top priorities?
Introducing bills, or what are my top priorities?
Let's do introducing bills.
Boy. 'Cause most of what my focus would be to undo some of the things that have been done recently. In particular,
And many of those take bills to undo things, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, undoing some of the recent taxes, the corporate activity tax in particular, because that is a not so thinly disguised sales tax, and it hurts anybody that has any reasonable amount of dollars through their business. I have a friend that is an electrical contractor. He has about 5 people that works for him, and he gets hit so hard with that just because of the number of dollars that go through there. Because it's the gross receipts tax. It's not, if I spend money that I already have to make a profit, and I get taxed on the money that I already have, I don't think that's right.
So you get rid of the cap.
I would love to get rid of the cat tax.
Okay.
And there are others that I don't have the specific info on right now, but various.
Other than revenue, are there any other issues that you would like to undo? Or?
Some of the education-related things. When COVID hit, a lot of the students couldn't make it to class for various shutdowns and other restrictions. When the graduation rates fell even further after that, rather than doing a deeper dig to find out why that might be the case and how we might be able to help them get caught up, our legislature voted to reduce the graduation standards. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. You can't have people that you say you have qualified for these things, you can read, write, do basic math, you are ready to enter the adult world and into the workforce if you can't cover those basic things. And it also dilutes it for all the people that did accomplish those tasks.
Do you have any thoughts about that? Because you're the third Republican that has been running for Salem that has, so it's clearly an Oregon Republican talking point, this issue of removing standards, particularly for BIPOC students, right? Where are you on that issue?
For me, it's a multi-layered issue, and this relates to my work in chronic absenteeism. And my goal is I do want to increase graduation rates. I do want to make sure our kids have what they need to thrive, but they can't if the infrastructures outside our community doesn't support that. If a kid is homeless, they don't have the mindset to be able to meet the basic needs that is required for them to thrive in school. And so I believe in restructuring our public education system in ways that really do support every single student. And I believe the Student Success Act is one of those policies that are really set that out for specific student needs. So when I look at the data, there's the whole data, right? I'm going to kind of nerd out on data a little bit if that's okay. But when you have to break it down and disaggregate the data and what student demographics students are not achieving at the highest level, and we see that highest amongst Black and Brown students, our Native American and Pacific Islander students specifically. And with the absenteeism data, I've noticed that the Native American and Pacific Islander students, even though in number-wise, they represent the smallest population centers, but they have the highest chronic absent rates, and that attributes to their ability to be able to go to the classroom and learn and get the basic needs of writing and reading. If they're not in the classroom, they can't get those skill sets. So I've been out in the community doing home visits and really identifying what
I
the
still
root
don't know what the answer to the question, what your answer to the question is.
Can you repeat your question again?
Well, he opposes the idea of removing standards, particularly for BIPOC students.
We didn't remove the standards. I think we just needed to develop
Reduce
how
the
can
standards.
we get them to those standards.
Do you disagree with John?
No, we don't need to move standards. I think we need to improve the infrastructures to get them to those standards, if that makes sense.
I just want to make sure I understand. So the two of you are on different
Yeah.
on this. Is that correct? Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think what Mark is asking is, do you disagree that the standards did change, that the needle was moved?
I don't think it's moved that dramatically. I mean, I work right
But
in
it
education.
has moved to some extent. They
It
were
has to
adjusted.
extent, but not to the point where like it's
Okay.
detrimenting their learning and their ability to be able.
Is this what happened a year or so ago
It was during COVID.
that Kate
Yeah.
Brown signed kind of
Yeah.
Okay, that's
without any
I don't remember
fanfare?
the bill number.
And
554
said-
maybe.
Can somebody enlighten me? This has come up a couple of times. I'm not sure I understand it.
Well, it was, and in fact, it's part of the whole BIPOC movement, the notion that tests don't appropriately
Yeah.
test,
But what did-
that
what
they're
did-
geared,
what
that
did it
there's
do
a white
specifically?
bias.
Was it-
So there was an attempt to change the standards specifically for BIPOC students, I believe.
Regardless of your color heritage, there are certain standards that are required in order to graduate.
Right.
And those basic standards are what were reduced.
Do you think there are systemic inequities in public schools based on race, or no?
I am not involved directly enough to be able to tell you that. I have never honestly focused on someone's color or heritage. People are just people. You're here, you're an American, so I don't
Do you think
focus
the
on
color of a person's skin can affect the opportunities that they have throughout life?
it. Throughout life, yes.
Okay. But you don't think that shows up in schools? You can't say whether that shows up in schools?
I can't say for sure. It would not surprise me if it does.
John, prior to your running for this office, have you been involved civically in any capacity with your community?
As a taxpayer for 36 years, yes.
No, I mean, have you been on any volunteer board, served on a school board? Is there any civic engagement?
Nothing of record. I was,
So, given that you don't really have a record of civic engagement, you're running now, is it fueled largely by anger at sort of how you've been treated as a small business person, or?
To some degree. For the most part, the primary group of people, or people I associate with in general, just doing normal function, friends, family, business associates, we all agree that the things happening legislatively in Oregon are not where they need to be. The fallout from that and corrections possible, they're just not where they should be. Out talking to people at their doors, crime and homelessness, top notch right there. It doesn't matter your party affiliation, your color, that's what's on their mind.
Gotcha. So last question, your website makes it very clear you're a fiscal conservative. You'd like to cut taxes.
Yes.
You want to reduce spending. Can you identify a significant area of the state budget that you'd like to reduce?
Sitting right here, I couldn't give you a specific answer. Certainly happy to take a look when the opportunity presents itself. That's not a deflection. It's I am not knowledgeable enough on that. I haven't been in there and had the time to stick
Well,
my
why
nose
should
in.
I have, let's say I'm a fiscal conservative and I agree with you, why should I have any confidence, given what you've just told me, that you're going to be able to ferret out wasteful spending?
Because I have to run the finances through my own household, and if I run out of money, I can't spend anymore.
But you're
I have
telling
to
me
be-
you haven't spent any time looking at the state budget and can identify waste, that you're just assuming, of course, there is, and you're going to figure it out? That doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence as a voter.
Well, I'm trying to give you something that's a little bit general, because I can't give you
You can't identify a program, you can't identify an area where you're sure there's overspending, or a program that shouldn't exist?
How about subsidizing public transportation? If you want to push me on something to get an answer,
Yeah, I do want to push
I will
you.
let
So
you
you
know.
think there should be no sub-
I pay taxes on that, and I don't use it.
So in other
Not a big
words,
fan
so
of that.
you support TriMet with your payroll taxes?
Yes, I do.
So your employees, because you're right, the fare box does not cover the cost of mass transportation. You don't think
Correct.
the payroll tax is an appropriate use of funding for mass transit?
Not for me personally, no.
Okay,
What about for
because
your constituents?
I don't know anyone that relies on the bus.
In the House district that you're running for, you haven't met one person who uses bus transit?
In the district, there are, yes, but as far as friends and family, what led me to run, I don't know anyone that relies on it.
Sure, I think
Overall, there's only about 5% or so of people that rely on public transportation. And a lot of funding is spent on it, a lot of effort goes into it, and what about the other 95%? I appreciate the 5% for the folks that use public transit, that's great, but what about the other 95%? If I'm trying to look out for the interest of the majority of the constituents in this district, it's that 95%.
Can one of the two of you define the district, the boundaries, and how it's changed?
Yes, so House District 48, it got redrawn.
Right.
It's one of those districts that looks dramatically different from the previous lines.
Very much so.
And so we cross between two county lines, Multnomah County and Clackamas County. So majority of voters are in the outer East Portland, Multnomah County side. And it goes out to Clackamas County, parts of Damascus, Pleasant Valley, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm still learning the names of the cities.
Damascus,
Carver,
Happy Valley,
Boring.
Pleasant Valley.
not Happy Valley.
Little bit of
Tiny bit.
Does it cross?
tiny.
Do you cross the Clackamas River?
No.
So
We
you're
go
not-
towards the Carver, Barton,
Right,
down to
but you
Barton.
jump
That's the
Barton
southern
Ridge.
border.
That's the border.
That's the border. And then how far to the west does your district go?
Like
About 172nd Street in Clackamas County, approximately.
little parts of Sandy and Board, like very like a chunk.
So
small chunk.
but you're all on the east side of the border.
Mostly, yes. House
Gotcha.
District 40.
And
So it
how
goes
did
out
And how did this new district change the registration?
It's still heavily Democratic. We also have a big percentage of independent voters and unaffiliated voters as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where you.
Would you, coming back to something Sophie mentioned, would you, as somebody who knows about vehicles and transmissions, would you do anything to change the Oregon Clean Fuels Program or anything that Governor Brown did on climate and emissions?
I would love to. Again, the reason why is not because improving the long-term sustainability of the climate is a bad thing. That has to be considered. But at the same time, proposed solutions that financially devastate most households are not the way to go. Pushing off the idea of electric cars, that's fantastic. The technology has to evolve on its own. If you try and force them on everybody, the infrastructure alone can't handle everybody plugging an electric car in at the same time. It's impossible. The whole thing will crash. So
But you believe that human beings are causing climate change?
well, having 8 billion humans on the planet, they're going to affect something. The planet cycles anyway. Things cycle up and down, temperatures rise and fall. We were once in an ice age, we are currently not in an ice age.
Do you think our warming temperatures are due to humans? I mean, do you think this is...
Humans have an effect, yes.
How big of an effect?
In quantifiable numbers, that I wouldn't be able to share.
Do you think climate change is something that our legislators, that needs to be top of mind for our legislators, or do you think that shouldn't be one of the priorities?
I think that being mindful of what's beneficial to the greater portion of Oregonians is the top priority in regards to that. It needs to be considered, absolutely, but you can't have the solution worse than the disease, so to speak.
So I know a big part of your platform, it sounds like, is undoing things that the legislature has done. What's a program you would want that you would add instead of undo?
Well, most of what I was chasing after is undoing things. What would I add? I would add the option to have the parents choose where their children go.
To school.
Yes.
So you're a strong supporter of the voucher system, charter schools?
Yes.
That's a safe assumption?
I pay the bill to send our oldest to a private school kindergarten because as parents we decided that what's being taught in the public schools and all the things associated with that's not where we want them to
Can you
go.
be more specific about what particularly you think is being taught in public schools that you're not comfortable with your kid being taught?
Teaching gender options and gender identity to a kindergarten, that is age inappropriate.
Do you think it's appropriate at any age? Do you think gender should be part of sex ed at some point?
At some point it's going to come into the mix, but kindergarten through 3, there's no way that's appropriate. They want to know what color their doll is, not whether or not they can change to a boy or not.
Are you supportive of trans rights, LGBTQ rights?
People are people. You do you and I'll do me, but don't ask me to pay for something that I don't agree with. That's where it gets into an argument.
So
I'm not anti-trans,
So that means
homosexual, any of that.
you would oppose public subsidies for gender transition surgeries?
Yes, I would oppose that.
Could you each give us an example of where you take issue with your own party as a sign of your independence? What does the Republican Party have wrong? And then we'll ask you.
The top thing that I have heard that I'm not a fan of from some of my fellow Republicans is their approach to the discussion on election integrity. There are potential anomalies that do come up, but some folks are dead set on living in the past. There was an issue with this particular election that we already had.
Do you think
Maybe.
Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election?
Yes.
Okay.
He's the one that's in the office.
Sure, but do you think, I mean,
You
there's
realize
plenty
a lot of your
people
peers
in
who don't believe who's the
Yeah.
answer to that Sophie's question is no.
That's what the results are.
But do you think those results had integrity behind them? Do you think there were fishy things?
Some, yes. There were definitely some things that went on that are not on the up and up.
So do you think he is the rightful president? Do you think Joe Biden is the rightful president?
Well, based on the official counts.
Right, but I'm
Yes.
asking about what you actually think happened, not the official counts. What do you think happened? Do you think Joe Biden's the rightful president?
There were certainly some notable issues with
Right,
the
this
vote
is
tally.
a very simple yes/no question.
I know, but it branches out into a whole lot of different other topics. Overall, he's there. He had the vote tally. We'll go with yes.
Okay, but you have, I mean, if I were to write, John thinks that Joe Biden was or wasn't correctly elected or should be president. Which one would be correct?
He's the one that's in the seat. He must have gotten there
Okay.
somehow.
All right.
But there's a chance that the voting was corrupt somehow.
There are anomalies in
Like
many,
what?
many, many places.
Hasn't this been studied? I mean, every report I've seen, every audit of this election said it was one of the fairest on record. Where's the evidence that there were large anomalies? I mean, didn't Chris Kobach in Kansas do a whole 2-year-long audit of what went on in Kansas, and I think he found 6 fraudulent votes, and I think the only one that, I mean, it's been a handful in everything I've read, nonpartisan audits of this stuff. There's been handfuls of votes. Why won't people accept those audits?
I couldn't tell you why they don't accept those audits.
Well, it sounds like you don't accept them.
I agree that there are some issues that take place. Whenever you have an election going on, you have the potential for people to be up to no good based on trying to push their particular side at any cost. How that actually takes place, couldn't tell you for certain. There are documented cases of large ballot drops at all hours of the night to ballot boxes. 2000 Mules shows that. I haven't watched all of it. I've seen pieces of it.
Can we give the opportunity?
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Tell us where you deviate from your party.
Well, I'm not going to really answer directly to hypotheticals, but I know that being a Democrat is not a monolith. We all come from very different backgrounds, so there's some that are more moderate, leaning left or whatever, but I come into this role just representing my communities. I don't answer directly to the Democratic Party. I'm also cross-party affiliated with the Independent Party of Oregon and Working Families Party as well. And so those are the values that wholly represent my district. And so I believe that as a Dem, we are heading in the direction. We could do a lot more. I believe there's some challenges still around equity that we need to really instill more in our policy making. And so I really want to make sure that we really push further.
This is very, I mean, everything you're saying though, it's all very in the Democratic camp already.
Yeah.
Can you give us one example of a bill that was passed in the past year and a half that was championed by Oregon Democrats that you either didn't agree with substantively or ideologically? And give us one concrete example of where you think you differ from your party.
Well, it depends on the Democrat itself, I feel like. But for me, we didn't pass a legislative pay. And I know that in order for us to have more representation, we need to make sure that Oregonians deserve politicians who can give their full time and 100% attention to policies. And so I'm a working person. I'm working full time as well as trying to run for office and serve.
Yeah, I don't think you're being responsive to the question, so let's try to reframe it. A big thing for us this year is a recognition that we've never seen this state so divided. And We've also rarely seen Oregon be so overwhelmingly dominated by the Democratic Party. And the question that we're asking, and I frankly think it's more of a burden on Democrats than it is on Republicans, is you're going to get elected. What are you going to do to bridge this divide? How are you going to demonstrate to independents and Republicans that you're simply not a robot who will do whatever the Democratic Party tells you? So if you could be very specific, I mean, there's a number of initiatives that are on the ballot, for example, that are put on the ballot by labor unions and the Democratic Party. Do you have any issues with any of them? How are you going to appeal to the probably more than 50% of voters in your district who are either unaffiliated, independent, or Republicans? Give us some confidence that you can recognize that your party doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah, I mean, I admit we don't have all the answers.
Well, but give us a specific where you deviate. Do you think the Democratic Party has gone too far?
Well, I mean, I'm a big union supporter, so I do believe that the unionization, that we need to work on more like supporting our union workers. And so I don't feel like Democrats are doing enough to really support our union workers. And so I want to make sure.
How is that going to appeal to Republicans and independents?
Well, as an independent party, I mean, my understanding of the Independent Party of Oregon and talking to voters, that at least people in my district, they're all working people. A lot of them are union workers.
So you really can't point to a bill that the Democratic Party supported that you've got issues with?
I don't feel like I've looked at it. I don't have a direct issue with a lot of the bills.
There are any areas where you think the state should be more fiscally conservative, a la John, and whether there ought to be more accountability, and there's a specific program you have concern with? I mean, we're giving you every opportunity in the world to demonstrate your independence.
Well, with the tax, like, I feel like we need to put more equity into taxes. So it's not about tax cuts, but for me, it's about really equalizing the level playing field for working families and making sure that the taxes really serve our community.
Do you think there's a place that this state is either wasting money or misusing money? Any program you can point to?
I know the CAT tax is related to the Student Success Act, and so I am a big supporter of the Student Success Act because that's where predominantly my work is, from the Student Success Act. And so for me, and also serving, I currently serve on the school board as well. I serve on the David Douglas School Board, so we do a lot of budgeting there as well. And so what I'm learning about the bond process this year is that public schools are solely dependent on property taxes, and not all property owners are the same.
So where is the state misusing or wasting money?
Schools are not solely dependent on property taxes, please.
Okay.
You must know that.
At least the bond measure with the
bond measures, right,
Okay.
but the majority of school funding since Measure 5 comes from the state income taxes.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, can you point to one program where you think the state needs to scrutinize where it's spending money or how it's spending money?
Public education, because that's what I know. And so I really want to restructure those funding to make sure that it does serve our communities equitably. So for example, the Student Success Act, a lot of times those fundings don't go directly to our communities. And so I want to make sure that we have accountability there, and that making sure that we are investing in the communities that it goes to. So like with the Measure 98 funds with COVID, we were supposed to use that to really serve our communities in hiring mental health specialists and social workers in our schools, but because of COVID, a lot of that funding kind of, I felt like, got eaten up by other priorities that these funding was meant to serve, if that makes sense.
Any other questions?
Can we give them an opportunity to ask each other?
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're gonna have each of you ask your opponent one question. Please state it as a question, not a statement. John, we'll start with you.
Okay. Background statement before the question. Oregon currently has nearly the highest per student dollars spent in public education, and we have one of the lowest graduation rates. So to me, that says there's an efficiency problem there. How would you address that? I don't believe we need more funding. How would you address fixing that within the money that's already there?
I hear you, and I know that there is money, but it's about management in this space. So having a look at the budget for education, we have to really learn how, like, I work in public education, so I know exactly the day-to-day operations and how students and family and principals and teachers, how they come in and out of the classroom. So I look at budget in that way. So having served on the school board, I see the budget, I see the policies, I see all of this, and my question has always been, how do we hold these budgets accountable? How are we making sure that on the ground level it's really working for our students and families? And so it's really about management and having the right people at the table to make sure that we can ask the right questions.
So,
to make sure.
so you think education funds are being mismanaged to some extent? And
Yes.
when we could do with what the pool of money that we have
Yes.
right now, we don't need to increase education funding.
I mean, we can always use money, right? And so, but however, currently with the budget we have, there is better ways we can fiscally manage those budget. And so it's really where do we put those investments? Right now, our workforce development education is struggling a lot. And so we're having to find investments on really how do we retain our staff? How do we keep them there by giving support and training and making sure that our schools have what they need to function on a daily basis. And right now, I've seen the highest vacancy rates for our public education system. And coming into the school year, we were struggling to get enough teacher staff to even run a school, entire school.
Thanks. Question for John?
I want to hear your thoughts about reproductive rights and abortion. And what were your thoughts about that for your campaign?
The question that I knew was coming from somewhere. I'll be upfront. I am pro-life. I am not interested in telling somebody what they can and can't do. I am interested in advocating for the lives of each person that's, an Oregonian. It's in the district, anywhere. Just because someone is not born yet does not mean that they're not a person to me. Polls have shown that Oregonians in general are not in favor of second and third trimester abortions. Right now in Oregon, you can have an abortion all the way up to the moment of birth.
Are you in support of first trimester abortions or abortions under no circumstances?
I wouldn't say I'm in support of it. I would say that I would advocate for what the majority of Oregonians are in favor of.
Okay, but do you support a first trimester abortion?
I don't support it at all.
Okay.
But
what
I
about
I would be in
instances of rape and incest? Do you support abortion?
Those are special circumstances. Those can be.
So do you support abortion
those
in
have,
those circumstances?
those have an option, yes.
Okay. So, anyways, I think I'm good. You guys good?
Can you tell us who your largest campaign contributor is?
My largest campaign contributor is Evergreen, Oregon. Not very big, but that's the biggest.
Evergreen the PAC or Evergreen the company?
The PAC.
But is the Evergreen the company have anything to do with Evergreen the PAC?
No.
Who's behind that pack?
Brian Iverson.
Who's that?
The head of Evergreen, Oregon PAC, honestly.
Okay, but
we can check, but what's their in particular interest?
They are helping organize the Republican candidates.
Gotcha. Okay, and how much did they give you?
$2,000.
Okay, and how about you, who's your biggest?
My biggest PAC contributor would be Oregon Trials Lawyers. So they contributed a total of $1,200 to my campaign so far.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. One last question. It's supposed to be sort of more of a lighthearted question. If the world were going to end tomorrow and you could only eat one food, what would that food be? What?
Ooh, that's a hard one because I do love food, but most definitely, hands down, it will be pho.
How do you spell that?
P-H-O.
P-H. Oh, but what's the first part of it? Oh, it would be pho. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Pho. I mean.
It's our second pho today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's such a comforting food, and
Yeah,
so if I'm gonna end my life on something, maybe something comforting and something that gives me a hug, and it's a warm bowl of soup, so we couldn't go wrong with that.
If you were going to recommend a good pho place,
Oh, Jesus.
Hold
let
on.
them answer. This is
It's an important question.
unofficial business. John, what's your death row food?
Lasagna.
Lasagna.
We've had a couple lasagnas.
With garlic cheese bread completely soaked in the garlic butter because I don't care about heart health. I'm dying anyway.
Right. Thank you both for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
John, what kind of
Really
car do you drive? I gotta ask.
71 Chevelle, parked hopefully still 2 blocks away.
I know. Does it have a catalytic converter?
Nope, hadn't put them on cars yet, so there's no need to worry about that getting heisted.
Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.